Welcome to Module 12, What's New for Returning Volunteers. This module covers what's new for both basic and advanced level VITA volunteers. By the end of this module, you will understand the revision to IRS forms, the modification to the type of returns prepared at VITA sites, the revised numerical rates and limits, tax law changes that apply to basic level tax returns, tax law changes that apply to advanced level tax returns, and where to find out more information about what's new for filing season 2020. This module is broken up into 7 pieces: the changes to tax forms, the changes to the intake sheet, the changes in returns prepared by VITA, new number, basic tax law changes, advanced tax law changes, resources, and summary. Let's talk a little bit more about those new forms. Schedule CEZ, Form 8965 are both now obsolete. In addition, there are 2 new qualified business income deduction forms, Form 8995 and 8995-A, and all of these draft forms can be accessed online. Form 1040 has gone through another redesign for tax year 2019. Here's what's changed. The Form 1040 is bigger than last year's postcard size. Income has been moved back to page 1. Tax credit and signature sections are on page 2. The new forms, schedules 1 through 6 from last year, have been reduced to 3 forms, schedules 1, 2, and 3. The box that indicated full year health coverage has been eliminated. These images provide a general idea of what the 1040 looks like for the tax year 2019. On the left, you can see the 1040 from 2018. On the right, you can see the 1040 from 2019. The 6 new forms from last year, schedules 1 through 6, have been revised and now are 3 schedules, schedules 1 through 3. Schedule 1, additional income and adjustments to income, is pretty much the exact same. Some lines have been renumbered. Schedule 2, tax, is now also known as additional taxes. It is a combination of last year's Schedules 2, tax, and Schedules 4, other taxes. Schedule 3, non-refundable credits, is now called additional credits and payments. It is a combination of last year's Schedules 3 and 5. It contains non-refundable credits, payments, and refundable credits. Schedule 4, Schedule 5, and Schedule 6 are all now obsolete. Starting with tax year 2019, there is a new Form 1040, and that's Form 1040 SR. Based on the draft form dated September 11th, 2019, the taxpayer must be age 65 or older to use this form. On a joint return, at least one taxpayer must meet the age requirement. Form 1040 SR fills the entire pages 1 and 2 of the usual 8.5 by 11 inch form. Form 1040 SR uses a larger font than the Form 1040. The taxpayers can take the standard deduction or itemize. There is a standard deduction chart at the bottom of page 1 of the Form 1040 SR to help determine the standard deduction for taxpayers who were born before January 2nd, 1955. Note, if your taxpayer is age 65 or older, they are not required to use the new form. It's just an optional alternative. You can see on the screen now an idea of what the Form 1040 SR looks like. Again, this is for taxpayers age 65 or older, but they do not need to use it. Let's review some of the recent 1040 history. In tax year 2017, there are 3, 1040EZ, 1040A, and the regular 1040. In 2018, there was just one 1040, the 1040 plus schedules 1 through 6. This year, there are 2 1040s, the Form 1040, 1040 SR, and schedules 1 through 3. Let's cover some new changes to IRS tax forms. The W-4 has changed. If you want to find out more, you can check out the Tax Prep Dispatch, What's Going On with Form W-4, for more information. Only taxpayers starting a new job after December 31st, 2019, or who want to revise their withholding are required to use the new W-4. The W-2 has also changed. The IRS is ending the W-2 pilot program that used verification codes to authenticate W-2 data. Because of the January 31st deadline for employers to file W-2 forms, the IRS can more quickly coordinate W-2 data with e-filed returns in the codes that are no longer needed. For Form 1099 Miscellaneous, there's no change for tax year 2019, but beginning with tax year 2020, non-employee compensation, which is now Box 7, will no longer be reported on the Form 1099 Miscellaneous. A new Form 1099-NEC, non-employee compensation, will be used instead. Let's think about some changes to intake, interview, and quality review. So, not much has actually changed on the Form 13614-C, also known as the intake sheet. The biggest change is Part 6. Healthcare coverage has been eliminated. Because the individual shared responsibility payment was reduced to zero, taxpayers are no longer required to report if they had health insurance coverage during the tax year. A new question has been added to Part 5, Life Events. Last year, did you or your spouse have health coverage through the marketplace or exchange? This just means taxpayers who had insurance through the marketplace are still required to reconcile their premium tax credit, which is found on Form 8962. Two questions were moved from Part 5 to the additional information section on page 3. Did you live in an area that was declared a federal disaster area? And did you or your spouse, if filing jointly, receive a letter from the IRS? New questions regarding the taxpayer's race and ethnicity have been added to the additional information questions on page 3. Taxpayers are not required to provide this information and may prefer not to answer for any or all of these questions. But here's what hasn't changed about the intake sheet. It must be completed for every return prepared. Every question must be answered. The shaded areas must be completed by the preparer. The preparer must also review the form with the taxpayer, and any question that is answered unsure or where the information is unclear must be discussed with the taxpayer. The completed Form 13614-C must be made available to the quality reviewer. Remember, the intake sheet is the preparer's friend and is a key element in preparing a correct and complete return. Let's think about some of the returns prepared by VITA. The IRS provides strict guidelines as to the type of tax returns that VITA sites can prepare. A detailed scope of service chart is included in Publication 4012, Volunteer Resource Guide. The following items were added to Basic Scope for filing season 2020. Form 1099-INT, Box 10, 11, 12, and 13 have been added. Several more unusual items that are not in scope may appear on Form 1099-INT. When you see something unfamiliar, check the scope of service chart on Publication 4012. In addition, Form 1099 OID, Box 5 and 10 are now in the basic scope. Note, enter the information just as it appears on the Form 1099 and the software will complete the calculations. For example, a taxpayer had bond interest of $550 reported in Box 1 of Form 1099-INT and a bond premium of $50 reported in Box 11. The software will put $450, the correct amount of taxable interest, on the Form 1040, line 2. The following item was added to the advanced scope for filing season 2020. Form 1099-PATR. There are limitations to this scope, however. If the taxpayer confirms that dividends in Box 1 were solely paid on items used for personal use and not for business, the amount of the dividend is not reported and is not included as income. No entry is required. If there are any entries on the Form 1099-PATR other than Box 1, or if the dividends in Box 1 are related to a business, then the return is out of scope. The Qualified Business Interest Deduction, or QBID, is still in scope for advanced preparers, but a new tax preparation issue for tax year 2019, QBID loss carryforward, is out of scope for VITA. The IRS requires that the taxpayer report prior year qualified loss carryforwards on line 3 of 8995, even if the taxpayer is no longer in business. If the taxpayer has a QBID loss carryforward, then the 2019 return is out of scope. Generally, you would encounter this if the taxpayer had a loss on Schedule C for the prior year. Always remember, do not prepare a tax return with any tax issue that is out of scope. If you encounter an issue that is in scope but you don't understand it or it wasn't covered in your training, just ask an advanced preparer or the site coordinator. And if they don't know, just don't do the return. What are some of the new numbers? As usual, income and credit amounts for the earned income tax credit have been adjusted for tax year 2019. You can see on this chart here below that the numbers have been increased. Here's a graphic representation of that previous chart, and we can thank the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities for developing and sharing this graph. The standard deduction amounts and the gross income test for qualifying relative have also increased. The exemption amount, however, still remains 0. Most of the standard mileage rates have increased for tax year 2019. Again, you can reference this chart below. Here are some of the new amounts for the child tax credit and credit for other dependents. Please note that they have not changed for tax year 2019. What are some basic tax law changes? Really, there's no new law for basic. But one item that was part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act didn't really go in effect until tax year 2019. And that's alimony income and alimony adjustments. For any divorce decree executed or modified after December 31st, 2018, alimony payments are no longer included in income by the recipient of the payments. And alimony payments are no longer deductible by the taxpayer who paid the alimony. So in other words, for taxpayers who got divorced or modified their divorce during 2019, the alimony is not reported on the return of either the ex-spouses. All other divorced taxpayers receiving or paying alimony report it the same way they always have. So here's an example. Tootsie and Trudy have been best friends for over 30 years, and they do everything together. In fact, they both got divorces last winter, and they both are getting $18,000 each year in alimony. Tootsie's divorce was finalized just before Thanksgiving 2018, and Trudy's divorce was finalized on January 4th, 2019. Tootsie will have to report her alimony income on her 2019 1040. Trudy is not required to report any of her alimony income due to the finalization of her divorce during calendar year 2019. One aspect of the Affordable Care Act has changed. The individual shared responsibility payment is 0 for tax year 2019. So that sounds simple, but what does it mean? That means there's no more penalty for not having health insurance. Preparers don't need to know whether the taxpayer or family members had insurance. The whole ACA chart on the top of page 3 of the form 13614-C is gone. No more trying to figure out health insurance exemptions on form 8965. Note, tax preparers still need to ask if taxpayers had insurance through the marketplace. And if they did, form 1095-A is needed for reconciliation of the premium tax credit. This is an advanced level issue. And also remember, a return with a shared policy allocation is out of scope. Clayton is already 28 years old and still hasn't gotten any health insurance. Last year, when he filed his tax return, he had to pay the $695 penalty. Clayton doesn't need to report anything about health insurance on his 2019 return. What about extenders? Extenders are items of tax law that have expired. They're called extenders because in the past such items were usually extended by Congress to delay expiration. But in recent years, the extenders haven't been extended. The Bipartisan Budget Act of 2019 extended the following tax breaks only through December 31st, 2017. They are not available for tax year 2018. It will not be available for tax year 2019. And that's the deduction for qualified tuition and fees, credits for non-business energy property, that's the residential energy credit, and volunteers will be notified if Congress passes any last-minute legislation to change these extenders. In terms of basic tax law changes, not much has changed from the last year. But last year there were important changes to the child tax credit, and now there is the new credit for other dependents. It would be wise for volunteers to go back and review the training materials on these topics. What are some advanced tax law changes? Not much has changed over the last year, but the new QBID was a doozy. It works the same for tax year 2019 as it did in tax year 2018, but it would be wise for advanced volunteers to go back and review the training material. Like last year, most of the complications regarding QBID, like type of business and wages paid, only apply to high income tax preparers. Like last year, most of the complications regarding QBID, like type of business and wages paid, only apply to high-income taxpayers. For taxpayers who itemize, the medical expense deduction threshold for tax year 2019 is 10% of adjusted gross income. The lower 7.5% AGI threshold has expired. For some extenders in advanced tax law that have expired for tax year 2019, they include exclusion from gross income of qualified principal resident indebtedness and mortgage interest premiums deductible on Schedule A as qualified residence interest. You can see here there are links to the draft IRS forms, final forms, the intake sheet, publication 4012, the site coordinator corner, publication 4491, and form 6744. In terms of a grand summary, there's really two notable form changes. 1040 has been reorganized again. Schedules 1 through 6 are now just schedules 1 through 3. The ACA section has been removed from the intake sheet. Otherwise, it just has some slight changes. There have also been some minor changes to IRS scope. Some obscure items on Form 1099-INT and 1099-OID have been added to the basic level scope. Limited items on Form 1099-PATR have been added to scope for advanced levels returns. There are the usual minimal changes to numerical limits. There are a few tax law changes for tax year 2019. The treatment of alimony and the ACA individual shared responsibility payment are two of the biggest things. Because there's not much new for tax year 2019, preparers are urged to review the major changes that went into effect last year, particularly the child tax credit, credit for other dependents, and the qualified business income deduction. There are a lot more resources available for further information. So thank you for taking all 12 modules of this training, and thank you for being a VITA volunteer. Feel free to peruse the rest of our collection to see what you may have missed or refresh your training.